Okay, yes, this video is sponsored by Coloso, and yes, they provided this course for free, but don't click off yet if you're not into sponsored course reviews. I've got a lot to tell you about picking the right courses in general, and there's lots of information here that will benefit anyone who's interested in improving their art skills with less stress. Okay, so if you follow my work on Instagram, you may have noticed that I've been improving a lot more lately, especially within the last 14 months or so alone. One of the biggest reasons for that is my focus on studying from others, whether it be looking closely at my favorite artists at work or getting critique, or sometimes taking a course. Learning from others can be a huge skill boost to everything that you do because you can easily develop the discipline that you need to learn new cool tips and tricks that may take you several months of hard work to find out on your own. And trust me, this still happens to me personally today. And for my case in particular, I've been learning from a lot of Eastern illustration styles lately due to my own personal preference, but also because they are just insanely skilled people. Unfortunately, it can be very difficult to find good education from artists from countries like China, Japan, or Korea, for example. At least for us here in the West. But an even bigger problem than where you're learning from is the fact that most courses in general are simply not providing the right wisdom to set beginners on the right path. Because let's be honest, and I'm going to go on record here, that a course is probably the easiest and most effective way to jump into a huge topic like art for most people. If you're a beginner and you know what you want to do, you know you want to do art, finding somebody who is doing what you want to do for a living and learning from them is the best, most effective way to set yourself straight going forward for the years of study and education you have down the road. So this brings me back to the sponsor of this video, Coloso. Coloso is a great education site that boasts super high quality courses for multiple types of illustration. They also have an extremely well curated list of courses with artists that I've already admired on my own on social media like Rhino Tuna and Mogoon. So I thought it would be perfect to take the time to check them out, and they later eventually reached out to me to sponsor this video. The biggest thing that you're going to see me highlighting throughout this video is how they talk about how to prepare you to be your own competent illustrator. They don't just spit out facts and interesting topics and tips and tricks for you to learn one by one so that you can have something cool to show off or say that you've learned. Next, I'll just go over what I learned from Sungmoo Hyo's character course, which is what they provided for me for this video, and what exactly it offers and how I personally applied the knowledge to the piece that you're currently watching me work on right now. Then, I'll go into the pros and cons of choosing Coloso compared to other free alternatives and common course websites. I'll share how the experience was for me and what they do well as what they don't do so well, and whether or not I recommend their courses for the price. And spoiler, yes, I do definitely recommend it. So a little bit about the course as like introduction. The title is Dynamics and Stylish Characters, and you guys know that I'm super into this topic, so it was a very easy pick for me. It's broken up into 8 sections that take you essentially from just beginner advice to the final project demo. But don't sleep on that beginner advice section. It is extremely important. What's special about this course is that Sungmoo talks about the right motivation mindset in the beginning, and he calls out a lot of nasty habits that a lot of beginners have, like over-preparation, fear of failure, impatience, and a lack of self-objectification that are super common reasons for early failures for beginner artists. Sungmoo also has an incredibly cool and logical perspective on talent. He talks about how eventually everyone has something that they can use to make their own artwork stand out. This section is basically followed by lessons on line work, gesture, simplification, and then anatomy. So the overall approach to this course is going to be one from a professional illustration workflow. It isn't really just giving you random advice and tips here and there. There's a specific workflow that Sungmoo uses that I've seen repeated constantly throughout the industry, and the whole course is geared to getting you to be able to do that effectively. The biggest takeaway for me, taking the time to plan exactly what you want to do and then carrying it out from there. That is always going to get you a better quality illustration than just going from the flow because of the nature of this type of work. So here's how I break it down. If you want to learn how to draw characters, you need to learn how to draw them and then how to color them, which is also called rendering. Those are 2 separate categories. This course in particular focuses on the drawing component much more than the color and rendering. That only comes at the very end. But within the drawing component, you can break it down even further into human anatomy, posing and composition, and then the character design itself. And I would say this is pretty subjectively more important than the coloring part, because especially if you want to get paid for doing this type of thing, this is where the information is going to be that's going to be able to tell things to whoever is hiring you to make this illustration or painting. I've heard it said many times it's much harder to find someone who knows the drawing skills necessary to get the job compared to the color and rendering skills. I've also heard that the color and rendering skills are the ones easier to teach than the fundamental drawing and understanding 3D space stuff. So I think this is a really, really great way to learn because it provides a good framework for any beginners and even intermediate artists, especially intermediate artists like myself, who have spent a lot of time studying on our own, but we now need to focus on cutting out wasted time from a very unorganized process. So going into the actual tips and lessons, for me personally, the most beneficial part was the last few sections because I've already spent several months studying anatomy and facial features and stuff already. This isn't to say that the course doesn't provide helpful tips for those topics for anyone, but there's just only so much you can cram into one course, right? And I've taken entire specific courses on the head and the face or just human anatomy in general. One thing I do want to highlight though is that the way in which Sungmu diagrams the body is extremely helpful and very clean. And the clarity that he does it in and the step-by-step process and continuing to layer and add detail is something you're just not going to find for free anywhere else online. There's a lot of really nice little tips that will help you get your drawings looking really good. The video on posing and dynamic angles later on is where things really start to get interesting in preparation for the final course project, which is just a drawing and then coloring of a couple different characters. Sungmu talks about how to look for interesting poses and keep an eye on the flow of a character across the entire composition. Now, these are things that are pretty difficult for beginners to pay attention to because you're going to be focusing on just trying to get the fundamentals right, and you don't really have the extra bandwidth to think about these things. However, the way he presents it is really excellent because I think it's important to set a clear precedent for how to strategize your illustrations on the long run, even if you can't really do it right now. I personally have been a very sloppy illustrator for most of my life. I've never really been specific to the workflow that I want to use, and that's something that I'm really trying to hit hard now. So I find this really good for beginners because even if you can't match the quality of the results yet, you know where you're going and you can start studying with respect to that and really save a lot of time. I would recommend that you prioritize picking courses that are really good and holistic and courses that are above your skill level that can give you a lot of value in the future when you refer back to them, rather than really cheap and easy courses that are going to give you a much smaller range of skills and not really open your mind to the potential possibilities of, what you can do a year from now. So let's get into the pros and cons, starting off with the pros. First pro is going to be that it's pretty high quality content and it's worth the price point. I can easily say that you are not going to find this type of content elsewhere for free. I only know of one YouTuber that kind of does this, and this is because the most effective way to learn is going to be to see somebody have a high skill level, see them work in real time, and have them narrate and talk about what they're doing the whole entire time. And then sometimes it would also be really cool if you could see what references they're using at the same time if they're using them. If you have all 3 or 4 of those things, that's basically the same thing as sitting in a college lecture watching someone paint and demonstrate something for you. The only thing you don't have is critique on your own personal work. That is incredibly valuable and the fastest way to grow. And you simply will not get all 3 of those things for free online. It's just incredibly difficult to. There is a high level of simplification for the details necessary for professional work as well within this course. So for example, at the end, when it came to the final coloring project, he mentioned something called the pull-off technique. This is something I knew about before when it came to rendering anatomical forms, and I just called it something else, like rounding the form, but I never knew that it could be applied to the entire body to give you an instant feel of realism, like he did in the demo. So this is just one example of a lot of super easy to implement tips that have a huge result on your artwork that are really helpful to hear about in this course. Another big pro is that, the expectations for you are set at the beginning of the course and that they have really clear learning objectives. being able to see these learning objectives not only just demonstrates the quality of the course because they know what they're trying to get you to learn and they're tracking that, but it makes it a lot easier because you can track the topics that you should be understanding as you go along. The course also has pretty good editing and high quality videos. The video player itself never really had any stuttering issues or buffering issues that I had to deal with, and it always played at a good resolution where I could see every single part of the software that Sungmu was using. And it's pretty nice. There's like some nice editing in the beginning to give you an overview again of those learning objectives. One more subjective pro is that I just overall agree with the process that Sungmu has in his entire process for creating the characters. So I recommend if you do take this course, you really listen and follow along to everything that he says for how to approach working and studying. He's really, really wise in this area. And my last pro is going to be, again, that it is suitable for beginners because it is a non-academic feeling, no prerequisite format type of course. Although there is a lot of information in this course and Sungmu is at a very high level, this course is still really suitable for beginners because every single thing necessary to be able to draw a character he talks about. And even if you can't really absorb everything or he doesn't talk about every single thing possible at the beginning, beginner level, you at least know that it's there and you'll be aware of what you're missing and you'll be able to at least learn one new thing that you haven't known before about that topic. So he even talks about clothing folds, for example, and whether or not you're really good at even understanding the form that underlies the clothing, you'll at least be able to start thinking about that and have an awareness that that's something you need to practice. Basically, the more experience you have, the more you'll get out of the course. So it's really, really going to be good for people who are intermediate like me. And then it keeps going up until you start to approach the experience level of the instructor himself. And then what you get out of it will start to slow down. And if you want to use me as comparison, I find myself in between the middle of that group and then the end, but still closer to the middle where I find myself learning a lot. And I think if you're like me around just before 2020, before the plague hit us all, I think that would be a point where you would learn the most from a course like this. So let's get into the cons. The course is entirely in Korean. That is the biggest con. It is going to be fairly difficult to kind of feel like you can connect with the instructor, and it makes the learning experience a little bit rougher because you have to really focus on everything in the video because your eyes have to be glued to the screen to look at the subtitles. But the good thing is that you can, change the size of the subtitles really easily and that there's subtitles on the screen for every single thing that the instructor writes. The second con is that, unfortunately, to avoid plagiarism, most of the important content from the course is not provided in a file format. So you're not going to have PSDs of all the anatomy drawings that Sungmu is working on. You're not going to have PSDs of the final artwork themselves. You're only going to have a lot of notes, condensed notes, and some example exercises for each section in the entire course. To be honest, this is kind of a bummer because since this video is not in English and the next con I'm going to talk about, it's kind of annoying to kind of have to go back and forth to look at different parts of the lesson if you want to use it for reference for your own drawings. So what you're going to have to do is really study along and take notes like you're actually at school. That way you can use your notes to refer to things in the future. Even just having a JPEG file would have been cool to help you study at your own pace so that you can follow along with where Sungmu is going as he's working and explaining things, and you have to read the subtitles. And the last final con for this course that I found that stood out the most is going to be that the player for the actual course on the website can be pretty slow and laggy sometimes. So again, I know they've done this because they've taken a lot of serious measures to avoid plagiarism. There's like an extension you have to download in Chrome or an entirely separate app for if you're using an Apple device. I'm not sure if it's only because I'm using Apple Silicon, but it does make it a little bit difficult to skim the course. There's a little bit of loading every time you want to click and skip around and see what's going on. It's really not that bad on Windows, but on my Apple Silicon Mac and laptop, it's pretty annoying to use because every time you want to go to the next video, you have to close the app that is playing the video and refresh the page and then click on playing the video again. It's going to ask you about the pop-up again, even though you've already downloaded the app, and then you have to wait for the app to come up and then you can start playing again. And it resets your settings for your subtitles and all that. So that does get a little bit annoying, but the course is pretty long. So if you really just sit down and take it straight through, it's not that bad. So my final words about this course is that this is an excellent course and definitely well worth the money for the content alone. You're simply just not going to be able to see somebody work through so much high-level content and explain what they're doing the entire time in real time like this. A lot of courses are just people talking over time lapses, so this is really helpful. It's definitely aimed at people who are a little bit more experienced with drawing, but you'll get a lot out of it regardless of where you are with your skill level because of how the format is. And like I said earlier, knowing the correct steps to create a character and knowing how to study are provided in this course, which is going to save you a lot of time years down the road. If I had any feedback to give to Coloso, I would just say to consider giving at least low resolution images for all of the multiple stages of the lesson process for the highly analytical components like the anatomy sections. That would be really, really helpful so that people can easily follow along and keep track of what's going on, because he does go pretty detailed. However, I do also see the value in forcing people to take their own notes, because application really is the key to solidifying what you're learning. If you're interested in this course, you can find a link to the course in the description below, as well as a discount code that Coloso has graciously provided to my viewers. So thank you very much for that. It's just ErgoJosh, and it's available for 1 week. So make sure you check it out if you're interested soon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Keep drawing and stay positive. Peace.